storage fields out there that we put the gas into in the summertime and basically sort of save it up like a squirrel saves up acorns for the wintertime. And then when all the cold weather hits, then we can pull that gas out of storage. Well, as many of you know, we had a pretty cold winter this year. In fact, I think the numbers I've seen are between 5 and 10% below average. And that was for all over the U.S. And certainly here in Southwest Virginia, I think it's colder than normal. We expected to see very large draws out of these storage fields. And we kept going week after week after week, and we would watch these reports and we just weren't pulling the gas out. This portion of the pie really doesn't change a whole lot. If it's cold, you're going to turn your heat on. This portion and the electrical portion just plummeted this year. And we did not see the industrial growth or the industrial use, and I think we saw a decrease in some of the electrical use because of the economy. So we learned something this winter, but we've got a great resource. Again, gas is used for many different things, as we talked about. So where does all this gas come from that we use here in the United States? I think the most important thing on this whole slide is this number right here. 84% of all the gas that we consume here in the United States comes from the United States. So that you can pretty much be assured if you're out there burning an MCF of gas, you're supporting someone's job somewhere here in the country. The other 13% comes from Canada, and only 3% comes overseas. So it is a homegrown energy source. It does come from the United States. And this map down here with the darker colors being the higher producers and then going to the white colors shows that most of the production still comes from the Gulf Coast, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma areas. You can see over here in Appalachia, we have our own, it's not quite as prolific, but we have our own production over here. It certainly contributes significantly to the gas supply. Well, one of the things as an industry that we're sort of moving away from is offshore exploration, and that's not because we don't think there's more out there. It's very expensive to drill offshore, and to be quite honest with you, from a gas supply standpoint, it can be a difficult area to produce in because of hurricanes and things like that. Running out of natural gas, we see a lot of information, or at least I do in my business, on how much gas do we have left out there. We hear estimates about coal and different things, and gas is a little harder to put your arms around, but the green on this graph represents proved reserves. And for us, a proved reserve is a well that's producing, or generally a well that's one location away. We can classify that as proved. Right now, we have about 200 TCF of proved reserves out there. We currently consume about 20 TCF a year. So that's 10-year gas supply, right? Well, it is if you're just comparing it to the proved reserves. And that's probably where there's some confusion. This blue area represents unproved reserves, which are largely come from areas that are a little further away from producing wells. And a big portion of this is coming from what we call unconventional reservoirs. These are reservoirs that 20 years ago, we weren't even thinking about producing gas out. I mean, our technology has changed so much in the last 10 years that we go in and we can drill wells and get gas out of zones that we never could have 20 years ago. And so a big part of this blue, we know there's gas there, and now we're developing the technology to get that out. That represents about 2,000 TCF of gas, which at current consumption rates would be about 100 years ago. So I don't think we're running out of gas. We just need to change the way we think about exploring for gas and change our technology. And we're doing that, and I'll show you some of the innovations that we've come up with. This unconventional gas we use the term unconventional, I think, because the federal government sort of defined that term back in the 70s and 80s, the DOE, in fact. And actually, our government gave us credits to go out and try and find gas in these things. We knew there was a lot of gas there. We just never knew how to get it out. And so we actually, exploration companies actually got credits to go look for gas and pull their methane plugs tight gas sands and Devonian shales, those types of things. And that project actually worked. It was an incentive plan that actually had us looking at these harder to develop resources, and it actually worked. And now we can see that this is total gas production in the U.S., and this curve represents the percent that's coming from unconventional reservoirs. In the 1990s, it was about 6%. Currently, we're at about 50%. And the estimates are that in about 20 more years, it'll be 60 or maybe 80% of our total gas supply. So, again, that gas has always been there. Nothing's changed geologically. We just are thinking about it differently, and we're figuring out how to get gas out of reservoirs that just traditionally we've never produced gas out of. This is sort of the poster child of unconventional plays, if you will. I don't know if you've heard about the Barnett Shale play, but it's underneath the Dallas and Fort Worth areas in Texas. And about 8 years ago, there was about 134 BCF of gas coming out of this play. Currently, there's 1.4 TCF of gas. So this play has increased tenfold in about 7 years. Pretty phenomenal. That represents 6% of our total gas supply in the United States. So you can see how quickly something has changed. And prior to this, if we went back a year or two, I would guess it would be very close to zero. And this is a prime example of where applying a new technology, and in this case it was horizontal drilling, to a play that we were drilling vertically, and I'll show you what that means here in a second. But the way we were doing it before was all wrong, and we just didn't know it was wrong. And we had to apply new technology and new thinking, and now this is actually the biggest single play in the United States as far as gas production. So this is the Barnett right here, you can see. And so when the Barnett play really began to become developed, what do? Well, we all jump on that bandwagon and we go look for other Barnetts, right? I mean, that's sort of how everything works. And we found more of these. The Woodford Shale in Oklahoma is productive from with horizontal drilling. The Fayetteville in Arkansas, the Chattanooga, the Huron here in Virginia, and I'll talk in more detail about this, and the Marcellus up in Pennsylvania. All of these are unconventional. 20, 30 years ago, we weren't even thinking about these as producing the kinds of gas that they're producing now. I'm from Virginia, and I never really thought Virginia was unconventional until I started working all of the gas plays here. Everything that we do is unconventional, and always has been. Coal bed methane is an unconventional resource that we have that we began developing about 20 years ago, and now it accounts for over 80% of the gas we produce here in the state. So again, there's another story that, 20 years ago we weren't even thinking about the potential in those things. Tight gas sands, and then I'll talk a little more about horizontal drilling in these shales and how that technology is really opening up a lot of gas around the country. This is a sort of a graphical stratigraphic section, if you will. It's sort of like taking a cake and slicing it and looking at the side of what the layers are below Earth. And this represents Southwest Virginia over in the north. This interval down into about 2,500 feet of coals, and we produce coal bed methane from that. From there down to about 6,000 feet of sands and shales, and we produce out of that. And then now we're doing some horizontal drilling in the shales and some of these other horizons. But Virginia has a very interesting history as far as its development of the gas resource. In most areas, what we do is we always go after the easiest and the cheapest first. And typically that's the shallowest. We're totally upside down with that. We actually came in and drilled these wells to about 6,000 feet